First up, we've got Quentin from Genai.
Good afternoon. I'm Quentin Smart from Genai. I'm a solutions specialist, so I work in the sales team, and I think we've got all of our salespeople are enthusiastic with our own cloud, but everyone understanding what it all means in the same thing. It's a moving space. So hopefully, what I've got to say will generate a bit of thought. Genai, we use cloud. We use Salesforce. Our developers use Azure. We sell it and have our own products. So what my job is to do is to help the customer realise value from ICT. And so everyone's reading cloud as the answer to that. And the aim, budgets, especially in Wellington at the moment, are getting smaller and more constrained. But when you look at what people are spending their money on, they spend almost 80% just keeping the lights on, around upgrades and infrastructure and things like that, which don't really add value to the business. They're just about running IT. And so IT gets a bit of a bad name. So what I've been trying to do is work with my customers, and these are large enterprise customers, to develop a TCO model to go, well, this is what you spend your money on, and this is what cloud would look like to replace that. Now, I've been doing that in an infrastructure as a service space mainly, because that's what my focus is, and that's what this focus of everyone's spending a lot of their money on, just keeping the lights on. When you look at doing infrastructure as a service, if you build a stack from the bottom up, it's the same stuff. So you've both got to have data centers, you both have to have servers, you've both got to have a virtualization layer that runs on it, you consume power, you put software on top, and if you're a service provider, you'll put an orchestration layer so people can come in and can consume that service. And then sometimes you actually have to pay for your software twice, because a lot of the software vendors don't want to miss out on revenue. So if you use a product in your customer, maybe you bought a Microsoft product. If you're working on a public cloud, that cloud provider has to buy the software again as well. So when you kind of add that all up, you go, well, how does this economically make sense? There's a great paper that was recently published about the European Union public sector, and specifically around infrastructure as a service, they kind of called it the horseless carriage syndrome. So when we moved from horses to cars, what happened was they designed the car to look like a horseless carriage. And so what I think we're doing is IT and IT practitioners are trying to use cloud in the way that they've always used normal ICT. And so that stops some of the value coming through. So to drive the value from it, we have to shift how we consume it. There's a lot of questions and shortcomings in cloud, things like security, integration, SLAs. But if you think about that, it's no different from people shifting to using PCs. You look at the PC compared to maybe the mainframe, and it's got a lot of shortcomings, but everyone uses PCs because of the value that they generate. And so it's again with the shift to cloud as a paradigm, I think you have to accept those shortcomings rather than trying to change them, because if you change them, then you're back to normal ICT that you had in the first place. And you can see this coming about because the CIO in the organisations, there's a recent quote, they've lost their monopoly. So people within the business now can go and buy a cloud service and consume it because it's cost effective and simple and easy to run. So again, as ICT practitioners, we have to think about how we can change and move with that. Another thing that sort of causes issues around the economics is confusion about lock-in. A lot of people go, I don't want to move into the cloud because I've gone with a vendor and I'm locked in and I can't change. And in reality, that's no different than buying a shrink-wrapped product from one vendor. You can always change and migrate. Some cloud vendors say, look, if you use us as infrastructure as a service, you can move to the next one. But what you'll find is, for example, Amazon has a certain architecture, how you deploy everything you put on it. And if you want to move to another large cloud vendor, then you have to change the architecture of everything. So lock-in it's an interesting one, but I don't think it should stop people from going there. And then scale, which comes back to my comment around the cloud vendors really got the same stack as you as the customer, and as what Ben was talking about before with the scale of the overseas vendors, of how large they are. So the major cost is in servers, data center, power, and you've got to have scale both in customers, because the customers, if they all used IT on Monday mornings at 9 AM, then you've got to have enough IT to support that. You've got to have customers that have workloads in the evening, and it works through the power of averaging that you can keep the costs down. And then you've got to have purchasing power as the supplier of the cloud environment. So, for example, overseas vendors, they just buy cloud as a container with 10,000 CPUs in it. So, you really got to have that scale and that purchasing power to provide economic benefit. Today, we can consume Amazon, we can consume Gmail, but in Wellington, in the government sector, there's a lot of discussion around sovereignty of data, and probably more importantly, surety of supply. So if you look at Egypt recently, where the internet was cut off, if we consume cloud from offshore today, we're generally doing that across the internet from a country that we have little control over. So the challenge for us in New Zealand is how we can have our own cloud provision and have that in a cost-effective way, and how we get that scale. And that's going to be it's quite a challenge, I think, for the IT industry around how we do that through aggregation, because if every vendor is providing infrastructure as a service, they're really not giving those economies of scale. The other thing is that there's a lot of focus on infrastructure as a service. And I think, again, if we're trying to save money, the focus is really above that in the stack. It's around the platform as a service and the software as a service, because that's where the value can be added. So to kind of sum up those loosely coupled thoughts, cloud really is about economics, and economics through the scale of consumers and suppliers. And I think that's a challenge for New Zealand as a whole. I mean, do we have that scale if we're going to provide our own cloud infrastructure? And we have to change how we consume ICT, the horseless carriage syndrome, to actually adopt to the cloud. Thank you.